All right, you should have your notes printed from your teacher, and we're going to go over them. The first one that you should have got is a handout, and the top of it says STAR method for problem solving. Well, this is what the STAR method stands for. First of all, we have search. You're going to search the word problem, then translate the problem, answer the problem, and review the solution. This STAR strategy is just a way to help you get through with word problems when you have to read through them and decide what to do and what operations to perform. As you see on your handout, the first one again is search. So, I search the problem for important information by. So what you need to do is you need to be reading it aloud. Perhaps you can read it aloud as a class. Highlighting keywords. Crossing out information that is not important. So the first thing you do with the word problem, and do not forget it, is read the problem. A lot of times we just jump in looking for numbers and start adding them or subtracting them or multiplying them or dividing them, but no, we need to read the problem first. The next one is translate. I translate the word problem into a number sentence. I can arrange counters and objects to understand the problem, draw the problem, or explain the problem in my own words. So once you figure out what to do with the word problem, then you can write it out, draw it out, use just different things to translate the words into symbols. Whether that's math symbols or pictures or whatever will help you to solve the problem. Next, you have answer. I answer the problem when doing this. Sorry, let me start that over. I answer the problem. When doing this, I consider the operations, the math operations I will use. Think about the steps I will follow and their proper order. Check the numbers to make sure they are written and are placed correctly. And last, show my work. It's important to show your work and think through what you're going to do before you do it, so that if you've done it incorrectly, you will not go back and make the same mistake over and over. You can see what you did and make a new plan if you missed the problem. Next, you're going to review the problem. I review my answer to make sure it is correct. To do this, I recheck my calculations. So you can put them back in a calculator, since that's mainly what we're going to be using. If you punch in one wrong number into the calculator, you're going to get the wrong answer. So kind of rechecking your problem, putting it back in the calculator one more time, making sure you get the same answer. And reread the problem and ask myself whether my answer makes sense. So if you have a problem that involves very small numbers and you get a very large answer, you may want to decide whether that makes any sense. So you want to read the problem, make sure your answer makes sense. You have another handout that you should have printed, and on it are just some key words used in math word problems. So you have a section for addition words. And these are so that you can refer back to this sheet, so that if you see these words in a word problem, you're going to probably add something in the word problem. Of course, add, all together, and both combined, how many in all, how much in all, increased by, plus sum together, and total. So you keep this handy, and it will help you to mark the keywords as part of the STAR method. When you're searching, you're going to search for these words on this other handout that you were given. Then you have some words for subtraction: change, decrease by, difference, fewer or fewer than, how many are left or have left, how many did not have, how many or much more, how much longer, shorter, taller, heavier, less or less than, lost, minus, need to, reduce, remain, subtract, take away. Those are all some subtraction words that may show up in the word problems. Then multiplication words. By, like a dimension, 3 by 4. Double, each group, every, factor of, increased by, multiplied by, of, product, times, triple, twice. Now triple means 3 times something. So if I triple something, I multiply it by 3. Twice means I multiply, should have done this, I'm sorry, multiply by 2. So triple, you multiply by 3, and when you do something twice, you multiply it by 2. So twice the amount. You multiply the amount by 2. So those are your multiplication words. Now for your division words. As much, cut up, each group has, equal, sharing, half or other fractions. How many in each, parts, per, percent, quotient of, ratio of, separated, share something equally. All these may indicate that you need to divide in your word to solve your word problem. Equals, there are words for it too. Is, are, was, were, will be, gives, and yields. All of those are words that could mean that you need an equals mark within the problem that you're doing. So we're going to take one problem in this introductory lesson and go through the STAR method. So first of all, we're going to search. So we're going to read this problem out loud. Fred is planning to sing and play the keyboard in the talent show. Last week, he practiced for the show 2 2/5 hours each day for 5 days. This week, he practiced 3/4 of an hour each day for 4 days. How many more hours did Fred practice last week than this week? Okay, so some of the things that will be important here is that he practiced for the show 2.5 hours each day for 5 days. Then this week he practiced 3/4 of an hour each day for 4 days. And then the problem asks us how many more hours did Fred practice last week than this week. If we look at go back and look at some of our keywords, each is located under multiplication, has each group. Each by itself can also mean multiplication. So also we have that, and then we have our many more hours. How many more hours? We see that under subtraction. So we know we're going to use multiplication and subtraction to solve this problem. Now I need to translate it into something here. So I'm actually comparing, so I'm going to make a chart. I'm comparing week 1. This is how I'm translating my problem. And I have week 2. So I'm going to translate my problem, which is basically I'm going to put it more in a form that maybe I understand, arrange it, draw some things, or explain it in my own words. So I'm going to make a little chart. And I have 2 2/5 hours in week 1 each day for 5 days. So that is multiplying. So in week 1, I do 2 2/5 a day for 5 days. In week 2, it says you do 3/4 of an hour each day for 4 days. I know I need to know that. And I need to know how many more hours. And it says, did Fred practice last week than this week? So we're going to end up taking the first week and subtracting the second week to find out how many more hours he practiced in week 1 than week 2, last week and this week. And if you wanted to mark that, instead of week 1 and week 2, last week and this week might be a better way to make my chart. So I'm going to take 2 2/5 and multiply it by 5. Well, you need to use a calculator to save yourself a lot of trouble in doing this problem. And you need to talk with your classroom teacher because every calculator is different. So if your classroom teacher doesn't know how to put a fraction in the calculator, which I'm sure that Mr. Chapman and Miss Woolard both know how, let them show you the buttons on the calculator to use. And we're going to take 2 2/5 and multiply it by 5. I don't have a calculator handy right now, so I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way. I'm going to change my mixed number into an improper fraction and multiply, and I know that this is going to be 12. So week 1, I have 12 hours of practice, but again, you can use a calculator. Again, on the next week, 3/4 of an hour for 4 days. When I multiply 3/4 times 4 over 1, when I don't use a calculator, I end up with 3. You should end up with 3 on a calculator. So it looks as if on week 1, Fred practiced 12 hours, and week 2, he practiced 3. But our question is, how many more hours did he practice week 1 than week 2? 12 minus 3 is 9. So now I have gone through the step of finding my answer. I translated my problem by putting these two things down. Then I answered my problem by doing the math, which I had 2 steps. I first had to find the total for each week and then subtract the 2 weeks. Now I got to think about how reasonable that is. So let's just kind of estimate. If he did 2 hours a day for 5 days, that would be about 10. And 3/4 is near 1, and 1 times 4 is 4, so 10 and 4 subtracted is 6, so that's close. But what if I had gotten the answer that when I subtracted those two, I got a negative number? Well, then I know that I've done something incorrectly, and that's in my review process. I recheck my calculations. I also read the problem to see if it's reasonable. So I have to see how many more hours did Fred practice last week than this week. Well, a negative answer wouldn't be reasonable because he can't practice for a negative amount of time. So that helps me review it, making sure that it is a reasonable answer. So now I have searched it, translated it, answered it, and reviewed it. Keep that STAR method for problem solving handy and put it somewhere you can use it throughout this unit, and also your keywords, because both of those things will be helpful in this whole entire unit that you're going to have, which is going to involve word problems on most of the lessons.